right, now to President Biden's pledge to cut U.S. emissions in half by 2030. Just this morning, Bloomberg announced plans to team up with Goldman Sachs to tackle climate change. The two companies plan to help more businesses and investors capitalize on the opportunities that come with a move to clean energy. And joining us now, Vice Chair of Global Public Policy and Special Advisor to the founder and chairman of Bloomberg, Mary Schapiro. She previously chaired the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission under President Obama. By the way, the first woman to do so. You have a lot of firsts in your career, which we'll get to in a moment. But I want to ask you about the pivotal role you think that companies can play, the finance sector specifically, in the climate crisis. What can they do?
Thanks so much, Mika. It's wonderful to be with you all. The public sector has a hugely important role to play in combating climate change, and we've seen this really important steps from the Biden administration in taking a whole government approach to climate. But the private sector has a role to play, too, because the public sector cannot do it alone. So I think there are a couple of things. One is the private sector can be very engaged in directing capital to green infrastructure in developing markets, for example, in financing green infrastructure here at home and across the world. But also the financial markets have an important role to play in making sure that investors are well informed about the climate risks of companies in which they want to invest, or for banks to understand the climate risks of companies they want to lend to or insurers want to insure. If investors and lenders and insurers understand the risks of climate that individual companies face through disclosure, then they'll be able to direct their investment dollars to those companies that are doing the best job of identifying, managing, and mitigating climate risk. And that will help speed our transition to a global low-carbon economy, which is essential if we're going to live up to the commitments we made by joining the Paris Agreement and that the Biden administration has made now to reduce global U.S. greenhouse gas emissions by 50%. So financial markets can be an amazingly powerful lever in this fight against climate change.
And so it's the transparency you're looking for, so investments can be made and maybe different decisions would be made. You think it would actually impact the climate crisis?
There is no doubt at all in my mind that transparency is the key to combating climate change from the private sector. We've led, under Mike Bloomberg's leadership, something called the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosure, which developed a framework that's now supported by over 2,000 organizations, representing a market cap of $22 trillion and nearly 1,000 financial institutions responsible for assets of almost $200 trillion that have committed to this kind of disclosure about climate risk that companies face and financial institutions face, and talking about that in their public filings as a way to inform the markets. And then the markets can price the risk and they can value assets much more accurately. And when people are armed with that kind of information, they can direct their investments towards those companies that are the most sustainable.
I'm curious, on a broader level, now that the Biden administration has rejoined the Paris Agreement, what do you hope to see next in the U.S. policy even on climate change?
Well, I think, first of all, I think it's wonderful that we've rejoined and that we're stepping up to share leadership on this issue with the rest of the world after basically sitting out for 4 years. So I think that it sends a wonderful message to the rest of the world. Our commitment that was announced last week to cut greenhouse gas emissions by 50% is also a huge step forward. And the fact that the climate fight has been put at the center of really every agency's agenda, not even agencies we would normally think of as having a role to play here, but from the State Department, the Defense Department, the Treasury is really leading here. Putting climate at the center of all these deliberations is really important to making a part of how we go forward in this country. The next step I hope to see is that the Securities and Exchange Commission, the agency I used to chair, will do mandatory climate risk disclosure rules that will ensure that we get comparable, consistent, decision-useful information about climate risk into the marketplace.
Yeah, you mentioned the first woman to run the SEC, among other things. What has drawn you, though, to the climate issue?
You know, it's such a great question. When I left the SEC after the first term of the Obama administration, I really was struggling to find something to do that would be as meaningful to me as my time in public service had been. And the climate issue became one that seemed to me actually brought together my understanding about corporate disclosure and how markets work, and this desire to do something of societal importance. And I believe deeply that this is an existential issue. I believe deeply that our children and our grandchildren deserve better, and that we have an obligation to put this planet back on a healthy trajectory. And so the combination of climate and markets was just perfect for me to get involved with. And as I said, I do think that markets can be very powerful tools here. We need to use every tool we have and leverage every opportunity we have in the fight against climate change.
Former chair of the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, now vice chair of global public policy and senior advisor to the founder and chairman of Bloomberg, Mary Schapiro. Thank you very much for being on the show this morning. We appreciate it.
Yeah, do we? Hey, thanks so much for watching our YouTube channel. You can follow up on today's top stories and breaking news, or catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.